Good evening. Welcome to New Horizons. If you have a mobile phone, if you'd like to put it on silent, please. Thank you very much. A huge welcome to Mark Cocking with The People versus the Banks, the last battle. We first met Mark at the Critical Mass radio event in Manchester. Mark has worked most of his life in finance. He is aware firsthand the trail of debt on individuals by the application of usury, either through the interest and compound interest on loans and mortgages and national debt obligations passed to individuals by governments. Thank you very much. So, is the problem just a few greedy people? Is it just the cash? Mark contends that behind the powerful river of wealth from working people of the world to the large finance houses lies the intentions of secret societies. People seeking the truth about the world are joining the dots and asking questions, first individually and then in groups. What if these groups combine their efforts to change this long-established status quo? Luckily for the powers that be, PSYOPs has been hard at work, causing dissent amongst the troops. How will this pan out? Let's find out. Please welcome Mark Cocking.
Well, thanks for inviting me tonight. The theme of this talk is the people versus the banks, so you're possibly expecting a talk about banking, right? Rothschilds, the Illuminati, you name it. Perhaps you'd expect to hear a little about the mechanics of fractional reserve banking, the issuance of money out of nowhere, and the implications of this, which I find, even in the truth movements, as we call them today, many people don't quite get it. In case you're not aware of my own understanding and perspective on the situation, I'd like to start by making that clear. I believe that we, the people, are at war, fighting literally for our freedom and our lives. I believe that this enemy will tear these islands apart in order to rebuild it literally as their runway for the continuance of global tyranny. From my perspective, this is not about the New World Order, but the continuance of the current one. They are stage masters, and what many see as enlightenment is, I would suggest, merely the stagehands shifting the scenery. I could pseudo-intellectualize the mechanics of the system all night. It's what I've spent a full career doing, and 3 years after that as a specialist in regulatory control. But such mechanisms can readily be learned and understood by any nowadays. Some of you no doubt have. So we will of course touch upon banking and finance, as the whole talk is the people versus the banks. But we won't be touching on it for too long. Once I go through, if I were to go through those mechanisms, you may still be none the wiser at the end of it. So what can I tell you that you couldn't learn on the internet in 2 or 3 days? Well, I could talk about me, and after all, having been in the alternative public eye, I'm often challenged, usually on the misperceptions of others. I could tell you tales, romanticized respectfully, or even retrospectively, about how I came to learn the stuff that I did. I could tell you about planting trees with Buddhists, being threatened for asking the wrong questions in financial circles, writing music themes with my mate Rod, as a contribution to what historically was brilliant edge media, historic station and moment in this country, just to help a TV station that didn't have any money, and all that came out of that. I could talk about hanging rock stars out of windows, my involvements and understandings of Holly Gregg and that campaign, the lawful bank, the People's Public Trust. I could go into my perspectives on all of these things, but I'm not going to. I could tell about meeting messiahs, prophets, activists, speakers, writers, and misfits over the last 6 or 7 years in particular. Or I could tell you about my 2 wonderful children and all that I learned as I watched or should I say, they watched their dad go from his suit and company car to the most dangerous man in England almost overnight. So I was called, incidentally. That's not my tag. Not knowing what to think, but they were always thinking. And they make me proud. If anyone is allowed to be proud or commit that dreadful sin nowadays without moral judgment. I came here today in the car I borrowed from my daughter. The consequences of what I've been doing I took on in full knowledge. Others I couldn't really have foreseen. One that was foreseen, though, was that I would be here today talking about the things that we're going to talk about. So, as it is a bit of a show, I must give some credit to the supporting cast before we go on. Thomas, whom these messiahs and prophets that I've mentioned will know as the twin, wrote the plot and says to them, "You're not the Messiah, you're just a very naughty boy." David Bowie inspired the spirit of the troubadour, and I'd like to thank the 3 Ks. That's Kate, Kevin and Ken, my friends, and all the supporting cast in this revolution, if you want to see it as a revolution. That's everybody. And last but not least, a bohemian hermit. I've changed the planned talk and instead want to take you on a journey. It's a synthesis out of which I hope comes a thesis, and I would suggest that we then create the antithesis with some intent. So I'm going to ask you to indulge me in 2 ways, if you will. The second way will be a journey through numbers, reality, magic, religion, history, science, and Hermetic art in an attempt to encompass as much as I can in no time at all. There'll be much on the screen to ponder. Please don't get caught up in the detail as time is flowing, and if you can help me to keep that river flowing, that would be wonderful. First, though, I want to start with a demonstration of the core principle of banking. All you ever really need to know about it, and the rest is mere detail. I was told that the demonstration on the banking issue I did with Karen Franson from Eerie Investigations on Edge Media TV did help to clarify for a lot of people how simple the scam is. So I'd like to present an updated, slightly simpler demonstration of that as my opening gambit, and then we will move on. So as to set the scene, as it were, before we leave banking and explore the width of a circle. So, is there anyone here who has a 10 or a 20 pound note and can just help me and indulge me for a minute? Just someone to step up. It's amazing this, no one's got a tenner. Well, now I need you as well, my friend. Ah yes, ah yes. Just a demonstration of how the banks operate. All right? So, would you come around the front of my bench? Because I am the banker and you are just a member of the public. Is that a 20 you've got there? Yeah? Okay. Can I have that? Right, thank you. Well, you sit down now if you want. Yeah. Sorry, would you miss this? Did you work hard to get this?
Yeah, certainly.
Did you put some energy into getting this? So if I nicked it off you, you'd feel a bit rough about it. Well, it's all right, don't worry. I can lend you this. Do you want some? I've got lots. Yeah? Well, if you give me 30 later, I'll give you this now, yeah?
Yeah, seeing as we've got nothing else, yeah.
Or should I just keep it, which is the whole point of what they do? There you go. It is license theft, seriously. And that's it. You can go, thank you. It simply is license theft, so don't get too complex about it. That's it, that's banking, that's it, that's done, all right? I think enough on that now. I left a poem up there. Why would I start with a poem that's like probably incomprehensible anyway? As I say, I want to take you on a journey. It's a bit of a synthesis. A few years ago, I sort of got dragged up onto Edge Media TV, and a lot of things changed. I couldn't earn anything in financial circles anymore, so it's been quite a struggle, a daily thing. What I did do, though, was produce music. I've always been a frustrated singer. I'd sing in the bath. I was one of them. I'm into synthesizers and electronic music, which actually is what tripped me originally into a lot that I did get to understand. And over the years, I've written my own music and albums. Pierrots and fools stand by your side at the end of the day, and one tells the truth, the other only lies. You decide. It's a brave new world order. The Pierrot is my representation of every man. And my point, to quote David Bowie, is, and I'll hinge a bit around him tonight for a purpose. Where are we now? So the moment you know, you know, you know. Where the hell are we now? What have we learned? And if we haven't learned anything other than a whole pile of facts, then what was it all about anyway? So can we get some proportion on this? Just a picture that a friend of mine drew for me a few years ago. That is supposed to represent the people restoring the capstone of wisdom. As it's been pointed out, they could equally be taking that away. I just like the ambiguity of the picture. This is all about the people, not the bankers. This is about what you're going to be doing. What the bankers themselves, and I don't mean the men in the suits, I mean the people behind what's going on, what they know. I didn't sit with them and ask them. I mean, I don't know these guys at the top, but I do know their philosophy. And so will a lot of you out there. But I wonder if a few things have been put together. On my journey in the truth, research and freedom communities, I suggested that we must come together to ask one question in the right way and at the right time. This has always been based upon my understanding of the Hermetic and Esoteric law by which our enemy conduct themselves. And this is my personal synthesis. And I beg the question, what do we ask the gatekeepers? What single question can have such rhetorical and natural consequence that its mere utterance is to create the desired outcome? And just in case you were going to, or thought you were going to see the question there, you're not. This remains unspoken for now. I believe that rather than just poking them in the eye, we can give them a right Pythagorean kick in the balls too. That little picture there by Daniel Le Bon Breath. Thank you, Daniel. To acquire knowledge, one must study, but to acquire wisdom, one must observe. So we've got an awful lot of knowledge out there to learn. I wonder if we can observe some of it. Thoth, the ibis-headed god of Egypt. Did you know that 8 times 8 is 64? Did you know that? I had to write on there, you may respond, no shit, Sherlock. It's really, so what? Big deal. Do you know that the Great Pyramid is a representation of pi and used to have symbols on its sides which are still used today in the tarot? In a total of 78 cards, there's 22 in the major arcana. I put there that that's a triple octave, or pi. That might become relevant to you later on. The remaining 56 are numerically subdivisible into 7 sets of 8, and thus the whole pack represents the subordinate inner octaves of the complete tarot. The pyramid is associated through history with the magic square of Mercury. This is occult law, 2080, and that is because 2080 is the sum of all numbers from 1 to 64. We're dealing an awful lot with numbers tonight. Please don't let numbers put you off. Most people are literally programmed to be put off by numbers. There's a simple beauty behind what I hope to show you tonight. We can't go too far into any of it. There are 64 hexagrams in the I Ching, 64 biochemical possibilities in RNA, which creates everything you are, and 64 squares on a chessboard. And have you ever wondered why computers use 32 or 64 or multiples of that as well? Here we have the brain, and next to it we have the all-seeing eye of Horus, that symbol that we've all got used to nowadays. And I wonder if we actually understand what it means. But don't look too deep for meaning. There it is before your eyes. It does, of course, mean other things, but it is what you're seeing there. It is the brain and all that that implies. So I would like to jump from there into a little bit of British history. This is an analysis of the poem from his book Milton by William Blake. For those of you who don't know, the Druids in the UK and around Europe state William Blake as being one of the chosen chiefs of their order. These are quotes from Ralph Ellis's King Jesus. David, you need to take note of that. The first connection that most people have made is at the famous feet. Does everyone know Jerusalem? Do we know the song? I don't need to go into the detail. Yeah. It's sung in churches to this day, quite ironically. Anyway, these famous feet have to be connected either with Jesus or perhaps with Josephus, or Joseph, sorry, of Arimathea. The former is more likely, as Blake mentions, the Lamb of God, which is a clear allusion to Jesus. However, the mythological connection between Glastonbury and Joseph appear to be far stronger than with Jesus himself. Yet Blake may have been correct. The next chapter in his book will demonstrate exactly where in England Jesus lived. Wow, where's he going? The countenance divine is a reference to the sun god, the divine rays of the great Aton Ra. Masonry was derived from the court of Pharaoh Akhenaten, Egypt's great rebel monotheist, believer in one god. So the ideology of Masonry, the craft, is biased towards a veneration of the cosmos. Egyptian solar worship was never as crude as the worship of the physical sun, contrary to popular belief. Egyptian theology, first century gnosis, and thus the principles of the later craft were therefore closely aligned to what we would now call science. Indeed, that is effectively what gnosis means, science. The question of Jerusalem being built in England is the central tenet of the poem. The possibility that Jesus came to these shores and established a religion that long predated the Church of Rome. It's unlikely that Blake knew of the cathedral that Jesus built in England, but his analysis that as Jerusalem was destroyed in Judea, a new Jerusalem arose in England is surprisingly accurate. Another of Blake's poems, entitled All Religions Are One, a title really which sums up his philosophy in a nutshell and demonstrates the Masonic bias and the central tenets of the craft. The reference to satanic mills in the poem has often been regarded as a broadside against the Industrial Revolution. And while Blake did have concerns about the cogs of industry undermining the harmony of nature, I, this is the author, don't see him as a Luddite. After all, Masonry was the driving force behind 18th century science, with most of its practitioners belonging to the Grand Lodge of England and the parallel Royal Society, Britain's foremost scientific institution, and Blake himself called Isaac Newton a mighty spirit. So, what were the satanic mills? They represent the cathedrals of the Catholic Church, an institution which Blake loathed for its oppression of thought and spirit. And if you go back to these times, this really was the issue in this country at the time. Near Blake's home were the Great Albion Flour Mills, one of the first industrial complexes to mimic the great size and splendour of the great cathedrals. Since Blake was not in a position to attack the church openly, he could nevertheless lampoon their great cathedrals as being the same as the Great Flour Mill. This was a powerful allusion to the oppression of the people by the Catholic Church, doing the work of Satan himself in suppressing thought and expression. The cathedrals became the satanic mills of Albion, England. Further, to quote William Blake direct from his book, Jerusalem, the poem Jerusalem didn't come from the book Jerusalem, incidentally. Jerusalem, the emanation of giant Albion. Can it be? Is it a truth that the learned have explored? Please take note of that. Was Britain the primitive seat of the patriarchal religion? If it is true, my title page is also true, that Jerusalem was and is the emanation of the giant Albion. These are all the words of William Blake. All things begin and end in Albion's ancient Druid rocky shore. Your ancestors derived their origin from Abraham, Heber, Shem, and Noah, who were Druids, as the Druid temples over the whole earth witness to this day. He is referring to the Great Pyramid and other such structures. Now, I'm sorry if it offends anybody's religious sensibilities in any way. That's never it's not what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to show you who actually believes this. And please, I'm not discounting it. This is what my research has shown for decades. These people believed it. There's Winston Churchill, the Druid, being initiated into the Albion Lodge. And they do take women too. There's our Queen, Princess Elizabeth, being initiated as a bard into the Druid orders. The word bard, incidentally, troubadour, that's really the angle that I'm coming from, and including music, poetry and so on in this. I would actually be putting on a full stage show. We've got a whole prog rock suite to put on, but it's not happening that way. Princess Elizabeth, the initiated bard. Bows, chariots and spears, coming back to the poem. It's pointing out here that Napoleon had just gone on his Egyptian expedition when the book Milton on Jerusalem was, or just prior to the publication of that book. It had been pseudo-Masonic in the first place, with one of the prime objectives being the investigation of Egyptian history and therefore Masonic heritage. To this end, the French military took with them 160 savants, including scientists, mathematicians, historians, cartographers, artists and linguists. These were the people they took over to explore the Great Pyramid and everything that goes with it. By the time Blake came to write the poem, a hero figure from Egypt was readily available from the first few lithographs that had come back to Europe from Egypt. These displayed the warrior pharaoh in his chariot with spears, arrows and bow. I could have shown you the picture of this, but I didn't manage to get that. Primed to fight for the cause of the old church, the church that transcended all contemporary churches, which Blake despised as the creations of men. The mental fight, quoted in the poem, was the reference to the intellectual battle between the forces of oppressive Orthodox Church and the free-thinking Masonic Church. It is a church. Freemasonry is a religion. The New Jerusalem is often assumed to refer to Glastonbury. According to William of Malmesbury, the site was said to have been founded by Joseph. It says Josephus there, incidentally, because the guy who wrote this has linked in an incredibly academic and highly acceptable way the facts that Joseph of Arimathea was Josephus, the guy who wrote the Antiquities of the Jews. Go figure. That changes biblical history in one fell swoop. I would say he's proven it, but what does the word prove mean nowadays? The real site of the New Jerusalem actually lies a few score miles further than Glastonbury in the shires of Cheshire. He's basically talking about Chester. Okay, we don't need to explore that anymore. So, you think you have a queen who's head of the Church of England? She is. What is the Church of England? It's Protestant, isn't it? Or is it? Is it still under the power of the Pope? These are all questions you really need to consider. But I put the picture of the Mobius strip in here because this geometry you keep on meeting in terms of the thought process you need to go through here. The Mobius strip has one side and one side only. How can that be? You can trace your finger around it and it only has one side. If anyone's not sure about what that means, try it with a piece of card. You twist it, join it, and you have one side. The point being that two opposite ends actually can go around in a circle. The same can be the other, the opposite can be the opposing. All you have to do is see it. Which brings me to metaphysical solipsism. This is a subject that does seem to be becoming more talked about nowadays, and it's hardly surprising because it's the key, I think, to seeing through a lot of misinformation. I don't mean to imply that those putting the misinformation out are doing it intentionally. They're just on the wrong side of the Mobius strip in their understanding, I think. Metaphysical solipsism is the variety of idealism which is based on the argument that no reality exists other than one's own mind or mental states, and that the individual mind is the whole of reality. The external world has no independent existence. It's expressed by the assertion, I myself only exist. In other words, no reality exists other than one's own mind. Arguments in favour of that: well, the only thing you have direct access to is the content of your own mind. Everything you've ever experienced has gone through your own mind. Just because one sees an object doesn't mean that all objects exist. You could be dreaming or hallucinating. There is no direct conceptual or logically necessary link between the mental and the physical. The experiences of a given person are necessarily private to that person, and the contents of one's mind are only the things one has direct, or the only things one has direct access to. One cannot get outside of one's mind to encounter any other objects, including other persons. Other minds are even more removed. So the basic form of the argument is my mental states are the only thing I have access to. I cannot conclude the existence of anything outside of my mental states, therefore only my mental states exist. Similar philosophy is found in the Hindu religion, and I'm not going to even try to pronounce that. Arguments against solipsism. And what I'm referring to here really is the belief that a lot of people have put out there that the world is just an illusion. Everything else, or should I say, love, for example, is all there is. Everything else is an illusion. We've heard that. I'm not denying it. I'm just saying to go around the Mobius strip a little bit to see where the philosophy comes from. Because it actually implants a meme which is the opposite of what it appears to be. The very idea of communicating philosophical ideas would be arbitrary to a true solipsist, as according to them, there is no other mind with whom they would communicate their beliefs. A solipsist who refuses to acknowledge the literal existence of other beings might be forgiven for believing she was only talking to herself. And you will find people actually promoting the idea of solipsism, standing in favour of that notion. I mean, I could do it now. I could give you a lecture on why it's right, but who am I talking to if you're just a figment of my imagination? And why am I trying to convince you of anything? So, do try and see through that philosophy. I think it divides the truth tellers from those who have been duped. Alan Watts, philosopher, true Zen was not that of the solemn and sexless ascetic, but the liberation of the mind from traditional thought forms, to raise human consciousness, to identify with the consciousness which is reality. It is essentially a mystical experience of reality, felt directly in a silence of words and meanings. I'm not going to teach you this, you've probably experienced it yourselves. Mystical thinkers of all traditions have discovered this. The 7 liberal arts, what the hell are they? There they are. And I don't really need to patronize any of you by pointing out that this is this is what the boffins have been taught in the past. They go through the 7 liberal arts, starting with the Trivium, grammar, rhetoric, logic. These are some of the skills that we as individuals need to stand in a courtroom, as my mate this afternoon has back up in Newcastle, incidentally, against Lloyd's Bank. To use the linguistic abilities that the judge or the barrister or whoever will use against you. They're taught to do it. It is an art form to destroy you. Using words, this is what they do. Watch them when you do the same back to them. It's hilarious. I must interject here and say there was a great a moment 2-3 years ago at a courtroom in Newcastle where the barrister operating for the other side, he didn't want us in the room. We were Mackenzie friends for a colleague, didn't want us there at all. And he was stood there, smug in his suit and all his minions running around him. And he was objecting to the fact that we were going to go into the courtroom. Well, the judge said, object all you want. They can come in, because we were decent people. We weren't disrupting anything. And this is the moment I started to believe that there is a God. Because right next to him, on the floor, was a child's dummy. This is in the middle of a court complex. And he stood next to a child's dummy. It's down by his feet. So all I had to do was literally walk across, sweep it up and say, I think you just spat this out. Thank you, God. Trivium, grammar, rhetoric, logic. This is what people were taught at universities, still are. Latin, you name it, it's all in there. That's great. We need those skills. I think we should all hone them. The quadrivium. So we have the trivium being 3, the quadrivium being 4, totaling 7. Incidentally, do please take note of that. And the quadrivium is mathematics, geometry, music, and astronomy. Now, in the teachings of this that I'm finding contemporarily, people are and have woken up to what these things are. But it's only very recently, and I've been speaking about it and pointing it out to people, that the realization that it's all about numbers springs to mind. Mathematics is numbers, geometry is numbers in space, music is numbers in time, and astronomy is numbers in time and space. Call it astrology if you will. Now if you think of them that way, you'll see something slightly different in something that you might have seen before as we go on. I am deliberately skipping a lot. Not skipping, but skipping over. All right? Nothing is being skipped, but I can't go too deep into anything. I'm establishing concepts and a synthesis here. If you want to learn about the trivium, anyone can do that. And that's the concept behind it, incidentally. The trivium and the quadrivium, combined with the 5 senses, will give you everything that you need to perceive and comprehend and understand. That's the logic behind it. I like to jump at this point to the 8 Vedic proofs of reality. How do you prove that something is real? Well, you can take the the solipsist point of view and say nothing is. Nothing is real but what I perceive. And you're all figments of my imagination. But as I keep pointing out to people, you know, this illusion that's out there, because I know love is everything. Everything else is illusion. But I don't know about you, but that illusion bloody slaps me daily. And everyone else that I see, one way or another. So it's no good stepping back and saying, it'll all take care of itself. That some divine force is going to interject. It's not. It never has. If you look back through history, as what is happening today has happened many times in the past, the people are always told, don't worry, a divine coming will get us out of this. And we don't. We go deeper into it. The Hermetic revolutions have taken place, or tried to take place, a number of times over the centuries, and the outcome is always the same. I would suggest that they're actually triggered and controlled by the very people that I consider ourselves at war against. The 8 Vedic proofs of reality. Again, let's not get into pronunciations. What we're looking at here, though, notice again there's 8. The first 7 are all logical, real-world things. The 8th one is transcendental. So again, you have 7 plus 1. We're again looking at an octave. Proof of perception. How do you know anything is real? Proof of perception by direct conviction. Proof of knowledge by inference, preceded by perception. Proof of knowledge by comparison, resemblance, or similarity. If it looks like an elephant, it probably is. It's a good starting point, yeah? If it looks like an elephant, don't assume it's a computer. You'd probably be off the beaten track. Proof of knowledge by comparison, resemblance, or similarity. Proof of knowledge by word. Proof of knowledge by tradition. Don't ever forget tradition. Proof of knowledge by probability. And the other more transcendental one is by non-existence. Wonder what that means. The irony in the mirror. We live in a time of enlightenment where so many have awoken to a fundamental personal reality, and it's best summed up by know thyself. Never fails to amaze me how many people get to know themselves and then go out and tell everyone else how to be like them now. Solipsism. Solipsism. We must do this because we realize that what we think in some way creates our reality. I think everyone's woken up enough nowadays to realize that that is a truism, at least to some degree. Are we consciously aware of the fact that this is the central element or central tenet of all mystery and occult schools? And if not, why not? And is that a bad thing anyway? Asclepius in the Corpus Hermetica. There are some whose ungenerous temper grudges men the boon of immortality and will not suffer them to get knowledge of that in which is divine. Of that in them which is divine. For speaking as a prophet speaks, I tell you that in after times none will pursue philosophy in singleness of heart, but there will be many who will make philosophy hard to understand and corrupt it with manifold speculations. In this way, by a cunning sort of study in which philosophy will be mixed with diverse and unintelligible sciences such as arithmetic, music, and geometry. It goes on to warn the student of philosophy ought to direct his attention to the other sciences, only so far as he may thereby learn to see and marvel how the returns of the heavenly bodies to their former places, their halts in preordained positions, and the variations of their movements are true reckonings of number, only so far as learning the measurements of the earth, the depths of the sea, the height of the air, the force of the fire, the properties, magnitudes, workings and nature of all material things, he may be led to revere, adore and praise God's skill and wisdom. If you don't like the word God, think of it as creation itself, whatever. And to know the science of music is nothing else than this, to know how all things are ordered and how God's design has assigned to each its place. For the ordered system in which each and all, by the supreme artist's skill, supreme artist, the grand architect, this is how the Freemasons view their creator. And is it such a bad way? Together in a single whole yields a divinely musical harmony, sweet and true beyond all melodious sounds. I tell you then that the men of after times will be misled by cunning sophists, the use of clever but false arguments, especially with the intention of deceiving, and will be turned away from the pure and holy teachings. I pointed out in my last talk that the word holy means science of, knowledge, science of true philosophy. Excuse me. For to worship God in thought and spirit with singleness of heart, or to revere God in all his works, and to give thanks to God whose will is wholly filled, blah, blah, blah. Am I turning into a Bible basher? The point is there. You can see it. This has all happened before. None of this is new. So, you have something called Hermeticism. If you look through the past, it says that this is the way the world works. And it defines the way the world works. The point is, if you go and look at that and study whatever, you will find that actually what they've said is there for you to see. What it means is for you to decide. But it is there for you to see in everything. So we're looking at the Hermetic code, or we have just looked at the Hermetic code in its concept. I'd like to touch on the two musical laws of nature. This is Hermetic science, basically. The law of triple creation. There are three forces: attraction, repulsion, and time. These three forces manifest with any phenomena and combine to generate all of nature's creative processes. If we see a cessation of movement in anything, this simply means that the third force is lacking at the given time and in the given place. There is always a passive force, an active force, and a neutral force. You can call them what you want, positive, negative, attraction, repulsion, time, etc. Bear in mind that we're often lectured nowadays about duality. Some will say, there is no duality, it's just an illusion. And I'll say, yes, there is a duality. And, well, I see duality everywhere, because it's there. I don't need someone to tell me it's not real, for everything does have its opposite. So, those who wish to philosophize with me on that one, well, I'll give you the answer to it, I believe, as we go along. It's not just about duality, but the duality is real. But I think you've been misled on how that duality works, and we will, as I say, get to that. All matter conducts three forces we call protons, neutrons, and electrons. Thus, in a higher state, all living organisms are composed of three orders of energy and form: matter in electronic, molecular, and cellular states. If you look at the world around you, you will see tripart allegiances in everything. There are, and I mean everything, there are three types of number, for example: rational, irrational, and transcendental. Also take note of the numbers 1, 2, and 3 themselves, for every other number is made from them. The second law of nature, so we've just done the law of triple creation, active, passive, and neutral energies combining into one thing. The second law is the law of 7-part formation. This is the law of octaves. To understand this concept, one has to regard the universe as a dynamic entity consisting of untold degrees of resonance which proceed in all kinds and densities of matter. They are generated by the forces controlled by the first law, then proceed to cross, collide, deflect, increase, decrease, vanish, or whatever. All such degrees of resonance are always inwardly composed and transmute one to the other in 7-fold patterns of formation and sequence. No element has been found to have more than 7 electron periods to date, and they won't. An octet rule applies to the periodic table of elements. I could put about 150 different, I could go on forever with those connections. They are there everywhere. That's my point. So we won't bore you with all of them. This is a subject you need to go look at to understand Hermeticism. This is what lies behind what's going on today, including banking. The other great Hermetic and Pythagorean symbol is the tetrad. And Michael Hayes in his book says the following: it's important to understand that to the ancients, versed in Pythagorean and Essene mysticism, numbers themselves, like the symbol of the sacred art of geometry, were regarded as entities in their own right, each being possessed with its own distinct individuality. 10, the esoteric symbol of the tetrad was regarded as the perfect number, not only because it's the sum of the numbers 1 to 4, 4 being the base notes of creation, but also because it can be further divided into 22 inner notes. Fact, 64 is the maximum number of ways in which 4 nitrogenous bases can combine into triplet units called RNA codons, which in turn correspond to 22 amino acids necessary for the manufacture of proteins, plus the 2 coded instructions for start and stop, 24 in total. Look at the numbers 22 and the numbers 24. They are interchangeable for a reason that should become apparent any second. There are therefore 64 biochemical signals on the inanimate side of the genetic code and 22 signals on the animate side. The Hermetic code itself, the triple octave, the blueprint of evolution, soul evolution, whatever, and I don't mean Darwinian evolution. 3 octaves. Now, if you don't even have to look at a graphic. If you've done music at all, you have 3 octaves. How many notes are there in an octave? 8 is the answer to that. Not strictly true. This is where the secret knowledge comes in. It ain't so secret though, it's before your eyes. A triple octave should therefore have 24 notes in it. But it doesn't, because the last note of the first octave is also the first note of the second octave, and the last note of that is also the first note of the third octave. So you have 2 overlaps. 24 minus those 2 is 22. As there's 3 octaves anyway, well, can anyone see where that's going? Does anyone know the classical definition of pi? No? Sorry? Yes, I'm sorry, was it? Yeah. 22 over 7 is the classical definition of pi. There you have 22 notes inwardly divided into 7. This is why the Hermetic code references pi all the time. Those three energies, or three octaves. Think of this as octaves of evolution. There's always the active force, the passive force, and the neutral force. Together, they create whatever it is that's being created. They are only active, passive, or neutral relative to each other, and only exist if the others exist. Take any one away, all energies dissipate. It's important to realize that they only exist in the presence of and relative to each other. You can go away and learn about this. There's nothing here that you can't learn in 10 minutes on the internet nowadays. But the concept of the triple octave, very, very important. Oh, I'll just go back there. Yeah, in computing, 1 byte was made with 8 bits because it worked best. Go figure. Why is that? Yeah, 22 was the most sacred number to the Egyptians. And notice also that there are 3 inputs bounded by 4 bases. The 4 numbers contain 3 bands. Do you see the point I'm making? They contain 3 different octaves. There's 4 numbers, but there's 3 octaves in there. A key point again when it comes to dealing with numbers. And boy, are we going to deal with numbers soon. I see we'll be coming up to a break, so I will finish this one. Linguistic coincidence, question mark. Words, time and numbers. Kabbalah has a numerological preoccupation with angels in the Sephiroth, the 10 names most common to God, which together make his one great name. These angels exist at the top divine level of Kabbalah's 3-tiered universe. 10. 3. The structure is reflected in the Hebrew language itself, in the 3 parts of Hebrew speech and the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. Dr. John Dee, whom we may get to touch on later, had some wonderful experiences recently over this one, but believed that an analysis of Hebrew was the way of discovering the structure that underlay God's creation, that the laws of nature were its grammar, the stuff of physical reality, its nouns. Here's the basis of numerological studies, which came out of the 15th and 16th centuries. The 24-hour clock was invented by the Egyptians, curiously in the place where for the first time humans calculated using the decimal system. 24, 3 octaves, 24, 24, 24. Yes, they overlap, so 24 is 22 if you want it that way. Just keep these numbers in mind. You'll see them in any studies of history, or anyone who's delving into these mysteries will keep coming across numbers. And tell me I'm wrong. There's people out there coming up with creation myths. Dr. John Dee himself has patterns. This is the nature of reality. This is what occult study is and was. But I hope to show you something which will blow all occult studies out of the water entirely by showing you where they come from. The Pythagorean comma, or kick, as the Chinese knew by observation, the circle of fifths was slightly imperfect. This means that practical music based on that harmonic series can never be played at optimum frequencies because this natural discrepancy is always there. Pythagoras calculated the precise difference and it became known as the Pythagorean comma. It's concerned with the notes which are absolutely harmonious to nature. The uneven periods of development between the fundamental notes of the major scale thus give us an exact picture in musical terms of the mode of progression through space and time of all natural phenomena, great or small, material or otherwise. This basically is the claim that's being made about Hermeticism or Hermetics, and you can go and look and you'll see that actually it's right. What's being discovered in science today confirms what the Hermeticists have said for centuries and millennia. The other philosophical concept, just before we break, that you need to take into account is the same and the other. Plato's mirror, I refer to. The same and the other. How one thing can be its opposite. It is the same and the other at the same time. These are the symbols used historically to define that. Notice that the other has 7 circles in it. Lambda. This was one of the sacred symbols of the Pythagoreans and was regarded as a visual expression of the underlying musical nature of the universe. The vesica piscis, which you see on the back of so many cars, the fish representing Jesus nowadays, it's actually pure occultism, pure occult symbolism, and it does amuse me to see it on the back of born-again Christians' cars every time. And if you tell them where it comes from and what it actually means, which we're not going into, they'll even think that you're Satan. The Sierpinski triangle, the geometry of perfect order. This is the geometry of perfect order, as all scientists, etc., mathematicians would agree. You can find this on the internet. The chaos game, coined in 1993, shows how you can take three, active, passive, neutral, 3, random, so you select between them randomly, pardon me, inputs. So 3 dimensions. You take a triangle, you project a point into it. Once, starting up there, throw a dice, it says 2, so you head towards the 2. Halfway down the route, you throw another dice, in this case it says 1, so it goes towards the 1. Throw another dice when it's halfway down that track. 3, up it goes, bosh, bosh, bosh. Once it's in the triangle, it never comes out. And if you put a point at the halfway point between every random iteration, it creates the Sierpinski triangle, the ultimate symbol of order created out of random number generation, albeit limited to 3. You can watch this on the internet, by the way. People can do this. So at that point, I think it's time for a tea break. When we come back, I'd like to take the top of your heads off and take something a lot further than I did on the last time I talked about it, all right? Tea. Welcome back. I was at the point in this synthesis, which hopefully will pick up pace a little bit, of attempting to point out to anyone who's not stumbled across this already that if it doesn't matter what religion you look into, you will find that its religious doctrines or documents or books or whatever will constantly refer to numbers. You'll find sects of people out there in each religion debating what the numbers mean. No, it means this, no, it means that. The great one, as I've quoted before, the born-again Christian who told me that 7 was the number of Jesus. Well, it is, sort of, esoterically, that's the number assigned to him. Why would that be? Anything to do with the octave? No, it's because the devil is 6 and Jesus is better than him, so he has to be like 1 more. That reminds me of the Marshall amplifier on Spinal Tap. It's like 1 better. Wake up, you know. Anyway, God is like the unit of number, for the unit being the source of all numbers, the unit being the source of all numbers, and the root of them all, the root of them all, contains every number within itself, and is contained by none of them. It generates every number and is generated by no other number. Now, everything that is generated is incomplete and divisible and subject to increase and decrease according to the Hermetic code, the octave. But that which is complete is subject to none of these things. The octave, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Do, re, mi. At that point there's a semitone. These are whole tones. There's tone, 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 semitone. Tone, 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 tone. Semitone. So there's not, the principle is putting over here is there's not necessarily 8 notes in an octave, because you must look at them as triple octaves, so there's 22 in total. In any given octave, yeah, you get to 8, but there's 2 more notes in there as well. These are the Pythagorean kicks. So actually 10 is a complete octave, and that's why the tetrad is there, symbol of that, 10. Anyway, moving on. But thou hast arranged all things by measure and number and weight. Freemasons and all sorts. So much research into this. basically suggesting that our Creator has designed everything with its own measure and number and weight. The signals of Thoth. This again is in the Corpus Hermetica. Mighty and strange they. What are we talking about? Veiled with their power, silent, all-knowing, drawing the life force, different yet one with the children of men. Aye, different and yet one with the children of light. Custodians and watchers of the force of man's bondage, ready to loose when the light has been reached. First and most mighty sits the veiled presence, Lord of Lords, the infinite nine, that's the biggest number that we have, 9. Everything else is combinations of those numbers. Over the other from each the lords of the cycles. 3, 4, 5, and 6, 7, 8. Each with his mission, each with his powers, guiding, directing the destiny of man. There they sit, mighty and potent, free of all time and space. Not of this world they, yet akin to it, elder brothers they, of the children of men, judging and weighing, they with their wisdom, watching the progress of light among men. Wonder what they were trying to tell you with that. Wow, what the hell's that? The prime number cross. And as I keep saying, I'd have to give a 7 or 8 hour talk on this to actually take you into this, so we can't even go there. But I want to make clear what the implications of this are. That's the prime number cross. I'll come and skip back to that. I do wish that I'd be able to display that somewhere else so it was up permanently, but that's just not the way it works at the minute. The book of Revelation describes God and the number of creatures around him. There's various translations on this one. The numbers tend to remain the same. In the center was the One, the unnameable, surrounded by 4 powerful beings. In the center is the One, the unnameable, surrounded by 4 powerful beings, arguably. And around the throne were the 24 chairs with the 24 elders. This is a 24-hour clock. If I'd put all the numbers on, it would have looked a right mess. It's a 24-hour clock, that's all you're looking at. Around the throne, around the 4 powerful beings, and around the elders, there were 10,000 times 10,000, and again 1,000 times, and again 1,000 angels. Could angels be numbers, by the way, if that's what they're referring to? I don't know. There is a key in there, though. There really is. Now, I know I've skipped through there, and I've suggested that it's referring to that, but you're not going to have time to prove that to yourself. You'll find differences, you'll find things that aren't different. It's not really the point, it's just yet another reference throughout history, biblical history, to something to do with numbers. So, the guy who discovered the prime number cross, he's a scientist called Peter Plichter, mathematician, physicist, chemist, basically you name it, and at the top of his game. He discovered something and then handed it over to the Jesuits, he says in his book, but felt that the public really needed to know, because as soon as he did release the information, he was well aware it was going to go underground and the public weren't going to be informed about it. He says things like this: space around an atomic nucleus contains the dimension to the power 4. Now, I've looked into this for at least 20 years now, and I can assure you I've found nothing to counter this, and I have spoken to some top scientists and some lowly scientists, and I have established proof of concept, put it this way, over 20 years. But it would go so far as to say, and to agree with what he says in his book, there's not a mind on planet Earth could deny what he's showing. And he will, you're challenged to come up with it. You will go and have to look for yourself. But what he's done with the prime number cross is unified every science known to man and discovered 1 or 2 more on the back of it. It is the numerical structure of time, space, matter, and everything, and provably so. That's where a long, long, long lecture needs to come in, all right? So we're just moving on. The inversion of the four-dimensional geometry derived from the base numbers 1, 2, and 3, and which has 8 rays. Okay? 8 rays. Anyone into New Age philosophy might start to clock onto the 8 rays. Must again produce a geometry which is constructed on 1, 2, and 3 and is triangular. There's that geometry. Note that it's also the interlocked tetrahedra, this Star of David thing. It's actually an interlocked tetrahedra, which, if you care to go, I forget the guy's name now. I'm terrible with names, but there you go. It's the key to torsion physics, the interlocked tetrahedra. If you were to draw interlocked tetrahedra, take the one on the left there, put it in the middle of the circle, which is the Earth. You will find at the points of the intersection, at those points on planet Earth, energy comes out naturally from the spin of the planet. It's torsion physics. It's an ancient science that's been encoded here. And can anyone help me with the name of the guy, please? Is the well, actually, this proves Nassim Haramein, but that's not the guy I'm thinking about. Nassim Haramein does the sacred geometry. He's showing you the sacred geometry that your Freemasons and your Illuminati and all that lot have been into for centuries. What this does is proves where that sacred geometry comes from. So who am I speaking to? Just yeah. Oh, there. Yeah.
What about the significance of the pentagram then?
The significance of the pentagram. You'll see. I don't mean that tritely. I don't mean it tritely. Because if we go into the pentagram, we can then have to go into all the Platonic solids, etc., etc. All right? This explains all of that sacred geometry.
The wheel of the old cloud pentagram.
Once more?
It is equivalent to the ancient cloud of the ancients, 5 angles.
Good. Well, you carry on doing that. I'm going to try and give you more framework around it, okay? 1 plus 2 plus 3 equals 6, and 1 times 2 times 3 equals 6. There are no other numbers that do that. These numbers multiply together and add together to make the same number. The number 6 is therefore the scaffold on which prime numbers are built, whose distribution appears arbitrary when viewed in the conventional way. And this is the point. The prime number sequence has been sought by mathematicians since Pythagoras' day, since before. And you can't see it because there's no pattern. But you know what? If you put the numbers 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 through to infinity and put them in a 24-hour clock, the pattern is there for everyone to see. And it is what's described throughout biblical history and religious history from any angle that you care to go look at. That's a huge claim. What I'm actually doing is issuing the challenge to come up with a single exception. And if you find it, great. It'll probably prove the rule. So what he's saying here is that all prime numbers lie either side of a multiple of 6. Wow. That was actually known. But they got the math wrong, or they got the formula wrong. He's corrected the formula. All prime numbers lie either side of a multiple of the number 6. And yet you've been told all of your lives that no one knows the order of the prime numbers. Schoolroom stuff, find an exception. And when you do, you'll find it's a square of the previous prime number. The prime numbers themselves are solely and exclusively a result of the structure of the number plus or minus 1. This is key to everything we're going to go into. Again, we won't be stopping long to explain much, because I think the second you name it or explain it, you'll lose it. So we are moving on. But think of minus 1 and plus 1. And the number 0. The distribution simply cannot be seen from a linear representation. They come as twins. The amount of numbers which lie between the prime numbers increase according to the quadratic decimal sequence 0, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to infinity. So between the first two prime numbers, well, let's skip down the sequence. On the fourth prime number, between third and fourth, you find 2 ordinary numbers. Between the next sequence, you find 3 ordinary numbers. And between the next twins, 4. And the next twins, 5. Again, we could do this. Simple schoolroom stuff. But why weren't you shown this in your schoolroom? What was going on there? Yeah. Actually, blatant lies. But the teachers teaching you are not trained to do simple arithmetic, so yeah. Let's not be patronizing here either. You have to admit that if you're looking for a pattern in a sequence of numbers, the first thing you're ever going to do is to look for the pattern in this damn long sequence of numbers. That's it. Computers will do it in a sequence. No, no, no. Put it in a 24-hour clock, and all of science and all of religion unifies. And it does. It does. Chemistry, physics, mathematics, it all unifies. Can't show you that here. On the expansion of the circle, so the prime number cross, think of it as a 24-hour clock, and each circle up above, think of it as a spiral, if you like. Each circle has a certain number of numbers on it. If you add them up, you come to a quantity. This quantity he is proving to be the fundamental base speed of light. He then goes on to show how light doesn't have a speed at all, which answers the question someone was talking to me about earlier, when he was saying, is it variable? No. But in physical terms, it will vary speed, because all we're doing is measuring it. When we take a measurement of the speed of light, we're introducing distance parameters. Therefore, like centimeters per second, whatever, the second you put centimeters into an equation, you're establishing a distance, which demands time, which gives the impression of distance. It's not. Someone challenged me on this a few weeks ago and said, oh yeah, but we put a mirror on the moon and we send a laser up to it, and that laser beam comes back down and we can measure that time, so we know the distance to the moon. I wouldn't really question that. But what I always question is that if you go and look at how they shine that laser beam onto the moon, did they ever get there to put anything on it in the first place is another question that's open to debate today. But if you shine a light up to the moon, albeit a laser beam, it doesn't come back. That's not what's happening. 2 or maybe 3 electrons come back. It's lost its energy, and they amplify it, and in the process of amplifying it, they introduce what looks like a time factor. It's a difficult concept, but it equates to the other concept that you'll find out there in this modern era, where scientists are discovering that actually, it doesn't matter how powerful you think your telescopes are, nothing has ever seen more than 300-ish times further than the human eye can. And it can see a long way. If you look out into space, you are seeing a long way, but your telescopes can't see much further than that. And it's for the same reason, as I just talked about before. We've been duped into understanding something that's nearly right, but slightly wrong enough to change everything. One of the things that would change is that these vast distances we believe are out there simply wouldn't be vast distances at all. But that's another thing. It doesn't really matter. This goes into the sums on those circles, and because we're not doing the numbers on these, it doesn't really matter, but the 4 prime twins on the first shell determine the structure of all other shells and demand a 0 shell, on which only -1 and +1 are located. This answers the question of why atomic shells have a lower shell on which only 2 electrons are located. This is just another example of the questions in science that this does answer. Because infinity has a triple nature of space, time, and number, the numbers themselves evolve on the basis of the first 3 numbers, and the basic constant of the prime number cross is the number 3. Therefore, the expansion constant of light must be the number 3. There you go. Perhaps that's your Holy Trinity. Isn't all of this about light, the secret of light throughout history? What is it? This will define it for you. He goes on to say, if matter did not exist, not one single atom, there would also be no space. Where there is no movement, there is also no time. Energy can therefore be nothing else than the reverse of time. You're not told that in your physics class. And it's a hard one to grasp, but grasp it. You're being mistaught physics. Everyone is noticing the amazing correlations between quantum physics and mysticism. Wow. How's that? Because if you go and look at quantum physics, it's the biggest mishmash of garbage that you've ever come across as a scientific theory. But they say it's all right, though. It's okay because it's the most tested theory in history. And it is. What they've done is come across something that works, so they think their theory and description of it is correct, even though no one can understand it, not even them. But what if you could understand something that unified all of that completely, answered all the missing questions, and was understandable to a 12-year-old in a primary school? Wow, wouldn't that change the world? The notion of 4 dimensions has nothing to do with the popular combination in physics of 3 dimensions of space and 1 dimension of time. 4-dimensional infinite space around a point does not possess a z-axis, but only x squared, y squared geometry. This is a form of geometry that you won't find in your geometric studies. It's not been done. It has behind the scenes. Of course it has. But there's nothing out there about it. And you have to ask why that might be. I suspect it's because it's the answer to everything you ever wondered about the occult and what lies on the other side of this veil. Because there are 2 forms of space, there must also be a life form for each space prescribed by mathematics. Ponder that one. He also points out that he'd seen the prime number cross shape before. It is in fact the cross of St. John, the Knights Templar, etc. I don't know if you can see that, but I could have coloured it in. That's where that shape comes from. On God, this is Peter Plichter. Just as an insect has no comprehension of the 3rd dimension, and he kind of proved that in one of his studies, humans are unable to comprehend the 4th. That's why a fly doesn't fall off the ceiling. It's not because its legs are so thin it can bond to the atomic structure. It just doesn't apply. It has no perception of the 3rd dimension. And various experiments sort of prove that, but again, you can question these things. Because we're conscious of ourselves, we're able to draw logical conclusions from recognized mathematical laws. If there has to be a 4th dimension, this higher and final dimension must have a form of consciousness beyond the bounds of our consciousness. Since the dawn of time, this notion has gone under the name of God. Hermetica meets prime number space. The existence of all things that are would have been impossible if space had not existed as an antecedent condition for their beginning. This is what Plichter has just proven. And he has proven it. I must keep emphasizing this, but you must go and convince yourself of that. For if anything is to exist, space for it must be provided beforehand. If things were nowhere, their properties, magnitudes, positions, and operations would not be discerned. 4-dimensional space, in contrast to 3, requires by its very nature points of finite size. So there's all these physics theories out there, but as soon as you take x squared, y squared geometry, you realize that infinity demands finite points, which is what we observe. Particles did not emerge at some time in the past, but instead exist because of the nature of infinity. The prime number cross and how it generates the Hermetic code. Plichter doesn't go into this. He's not done the Hermetic stuff, or he's not into esoteric stuff. He is a scientist. But it's there for you to see. And if you can imagine back to that 8-ray thing, well, there's 8 rays straight away. And you can take it from there. Scientists engaged in thermodynamics have attempted to describe collision processes. They did not suspect that a mole of gas with its 10 to the 23rd molecules represents a grid structure in which the colliding molecules are themselves the grid. The gas medium, with its reciprocal numerical order, manages the transmission of music according to a fractal system containing 8 stages. An octave is complete after 8 stages. This isn't Hermetic stuff. He's pointing out something that is fact. The whole secret of music theory is contained in the fact that halving the 3-part, 5-part, and 7-part of the string can be shown to result from there being 2 prime numbers which don't fit the bill. All prime numbers fit one equation, except 2 of them. Now, won't go into it, but what he does prove is that those 2 prime numbers, they're not missing, but they don't abide by that law. And I wonder if you can work out what they are. It's simple, but we won't go there. Because they exist, there should be 2, because he's mapped all of this to the elements as well, there should be 2 missing elements, and it even defines what they should be, 61 and 43, and what happens when you go and look. A fascinating book on the discovery of every element. You must go and look at 61 and 43. And then if you're into numbers, add them together and see what that element is too. And where elements 61 and 43 went, because they've also found that in science as well. It builds to a picture which says, hang on, we have to stop and think about this. So what? What's it all about? Well, the revelation of a universal plan will force scientists and theologians to review their dogmatic vanity and give every lay person the chance to inquire into the matter to whatever degree they like. Each individual will thus be able to declare his or her own independence or self-appointed authority. This will logically lead to individual responsibility and freedom. We're moving into Freeman concepts now. The Gospel of Thomas, the twin. Fair bit of stuff in here, some of it not quite so relevant to today's talk, but these are the secret sayings that the living Jesus spoke and Didymus Judas Thomas recorded. And he said, whoever discovers the interpretations of these sayings will not taste death. Oh, there's a big mystery with all of this, isn't there? He also said those who seek should not stop seeking until they find. When they find, they will be disturbed. And if you go and look at the prime number cross, it will disturb the hell out of you, because the implications are beyond a few moments' consideration. When they are disturbed, they will marvel, will reign over all. And after they've reigned, they will rest. The one who seeks will find, the one who knocks, to that one it will be opened. You can take the prime number cross, incidentally, and actually use it. If you have money, do not lend it out at interest, rather give it to the one from whom you will not get it back. Well, that could be an instruction to give it to the bankers, couldn't it? But, you know. Jesus says, show me the stone that the builders have rejected. It is the cornerstone. Freemasonry is built on that. This is their God, yeah? Try taking a Freemason who's actually gone far enough to understand that they're studying sacred geometry and Egyptian religion and so on, and point out that the ratio of the corner cap of a square to the circle is 0.2732. More on this soon. It is the cornerstone that the builders rejected. What was that last bit? Yeah, so let's seek a little further and see what we find. What's so special about the moon? Another little Bowie reference in there. See if you can spot them. Yeah? You'll find lyrics scattered throughout as well. Whoever becomes aware of the relationship between this astronomical data of the Earth and the moon will know that the two heavenly bodies are mathematically linked with the greatest degree of precision. Again, this is Peter Plichter saying this, but you'll have heard this from others, I'm sure, because nobody was present to form these spheres with his hands, to bring them to the correct distance, to start them at reciprocal orbiting numbers, and I'll show you this soon. The only explanation left is that nature is, in itself, intelligent, and that we human beings, as self-reflecting creatures, are the self-realization of this intelligence. And I pose the question, or were they present? then to put the moon where it is. Who knows? But whoever did this. Oh, didn't do that. That's just an overexposure. You all know there's hundreds of pictures you could do on the moon, yeah? Something is up there, as it is on other planets throughout this solar system. And it's not just a myth. Freak out in a moon age daydream. Okay. Absolute zero, minus 273.2. Sidereal month, 27.32 days. Ratio of the corner cap of a square to a circle. And what I mean by this is if you were to take the square of that frame and draw a circle within it so it touches all the edges, yeah? The flap that's left up in that corner is 0.2732 as a ratio to the... Is that still going? Yes. The Earth's orbit around the Sun, 366 days. That's a sidereal measurement if you step off planet. It is 366 revolutions. 1 over 366 is 2732. The key to numbers throughout history and through numerology is to reciprocate them. Don't just take them at face value. Divide into one and a whole lot becomes apparent. The Earth's orbit around the Sun, 1 over 366 is 2732. Reciprocal geometric lock. To prove the point above, if you put 1 over 2732, you get 366. Whoa. Hang on a minute. Statistical average female hormone cycle, 27.32 days. I'm trying to resist cracking the thing I said last time, but it seems like every 2 or 3 bloody days to me. Statistical average human gestation period, 273.2 days. Statistical average. Please take note of that. It's key. Your own cycles might be different. You have enough numbers, you take the statistical average, it's bang on. It's accurate, and this is how you're manipulated, incidentally. They don't care about you, they do care about the statistical averages. There are, of course, 273.2 days and 10 sidereal months. The ratio of pi to the number 4 is 1.2732. The moon's acceleration relative to Earth is 0.273 centimeters per second squared. But hang on, that's not 2732, but it would be if you add the 2. All right, we're getting there. And no doubt when they have more accurate measurements, we know what it's going to come to. At what point does something become self-apparent is what I'm on about. The radius of the moon, 0.273 Earth radii. Professor Tom, great researcher, proved that ancient man used the megalithic yard, 2.732 feet, in the construction of the global grid. If you don't know what the global grid is, you have a lifetime's work there. It's wonderful. Gas expands or contracts by 1 over 273.2 of its volume for every 1 degree. Interesting number, this 2732. It's a universal constant. You'll find it nowhere in your physics books. Whoever put the moon there did it using these numbers. Naturally or otherwise, we're in a reciprocal lock relationship with the moon. Some people say we don't need the moon. Well, thank God that they're not in a position just to take it away. Yeah? Hell. People who say that have not explored the numbers and don't get what's actually going on. And I'm not claiming to know what's actually going on, but I know certain things, and I think they need to go out there. Blah, blah, blah. I'll skip through this one. There were 83... yeah, this was a story, so hence the wording of it, but it's true. There's 83 natural stable elements. Go and look at the table. 83 of them. These unstable elements do not occur in nature. If they do, they declare into non-existence. So in the story, he looked and found that 2 of the 83 stable elements were actually radioactive, and the teacher had no idea why they should be there. This is elements 61 and 43 on the element tables. Shouldn't be there. They don't exist, so what the hell are they doing in a list of stable elements? Ask your teacher, professor. They haven't a clue. They're there because they were put there. There are only 81 stable elements. And an initiate called Asimov gave a clue when he wrote there are only 81 stable elements in his book of facts, though he provided no further detail. These elements all have families called isotopes. There are no more than 10 isotopes anywhere for anything. But that's been buried, as Plichter says. The number 10 appears a bit too mystical for some people in high places. He recalled that all the numbers are generated by the reciprocal reflection of 81. So 1 over 81 equals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Isn't that interesting? That's your number sequence coming out of the number 81.
Is that why we have 10 Downing Street?
That's definitely why we have 10 Downing Street, yeah. There seemed to be a relationship between the ratio of the mass of the Earth and the Moon and the numbers of the elements and their isotopes. Whilst looking up the mass of the Moon in a book, he noticed also that the Moon's acceleration. We've done these numbers, so I won't bore you with them. But the point is, it all links into a perfect, beautiful system. The Moon is there to do what it does, so you take it away and it won't do what it does anymore. And you don't need space aliens up there directing rays down to us. You really don't. Nice thought. Anything could be on the Moon. Who knows? I know there's something there. We see pictures of them. But to say what it is, I think is a bit far out. To imply it's aliens sat in a hollow moon. I do think the Moon's hollow. But you don't need the aliens to do it. You simply need the prime number cross. And the sacred geometry joins everything. Once you know that, you can interfere with it. And that is the solution to everything, incidentally. Interfering with the enemy's sacred geometry. That's the way I've seen it since I learned some of this stuff. It shows a way to get rid of them. On the basis, a bit Harry Potterish, but every magic spell has its counter spell. I've been chasing John Dee's magic mirror, which we'll get on to shortly. Yes, we will. And ironically, although I'll probably be proved wrong on this, it could be up in Alnwick Castle in Northumberland, which is where they filmed Harry Potter, and it's just up the road from me. Probably wrong, but it's very interesting. That's because his John Dee's best buddy was the Duke of Northumberland, and so on. Plichter's prime number cross unifies with Harrowlane's geometry and actually explains the very source of all of that, and therefore all sacred geometry. Go compute. On evil, it was beyond God's power to put a stop to evil and expel it from the universe, for it's present in the world in such sort that it is manifestly an inseparable part thereof. This is your duality. It's built into everything. But basically, you were provided with a mind, intellect, knowledge, and intuition, and it's in virtue of these gifts that we stand higher than the beasts, and by these alone, we're enabled to shut the traps and deceptions out. This is thousands of years ago they're talking about this stuff. Iapetus, sorry, just threw another random one in talking about the moon. You've all seen this by now. If you haven't, please go and look. Fascinating. And it's the guy who published these that I was talking about before with the tetrahedral physics. Yeah, there you go. Lucifer, the Jesuit telescope. Why would you, if you're a Roman Catholic Church, why would you call your telescope Lucifer? And why would you call it the large binocular telescope near infrared utility with camera and integral field unit for extragalactic research, just so it can look vaguely like Lucifer? It's like, interesting. Now I was going to do a sausage at a bar mitzvah joke there, but we won't do that one. The next day, Bowie's lyrical critique of the priesthood, I don't know. The priesthood certainly went up in arms when he released the video to it. First they give you everything that you want, then they take back everything you have. They live upon their feet and they die upon their knees. They can work with Satan while they dress like the saints. They know God exists, for the devil told them so. Jinn, angels, reptilian complex, meme or archon. What are these things? From the virus of the mind, Richard Brody, the guy who created Microsoft Word, a savant, basically. The most profound insight from memetics is that your thoughts are not always your own. You catch thoughts, you get infected by them directly and by other people. Sorry, and indirectly from viruses of the mind. There are 3 universes where viruses exist. The universe of biology, computers, and the mind. You could say biology is the mind, but no. Take the point. Is that space, time, and number? The key to a successful profit virus is having an incentive to evangelize or enroll new people. The temple and the money changers are symbiotic and act as one organism. The reason faith works is that when people believe they have a purpose in life, they get things accomplished that they otherwise wouldn't. Well, there's a truism. You don't have to have faith in any particular God or any particular thing, but whatever you have your faith in, it will help you through. Current religious history places the invention of hell, meme, with the Jews under Roman oppression. And they did. They invented it. So there. Go read it. A religion formed in this way as a cultural virus evolves not towards truth, not towards a betterment of its adherents, but towards more effective means. Meme evolution is not designed to benefit the individual. Key point, this next one. The very act of asking people a question can create or reinforce a meme in their minds. Asking enough of the right question will actually change their belief system. And a brief reminder there, because there are 2 forms of space, please keep in mind that there's got to be a life form for each one. That's the concept you're working with here. So, truth finders out there, there is a problem with this meme that I will program myself with the truth. You can't ever know the truth of the whole universe, and the best you can do is come up with a simplified model that works most of the time. It's believing these models that plays the devil. I've just shown you a simplified model of the whole of creation. The point is, it's not simplified, it is simple. And it's not a model. Sacred geometry is a model. But take the point. People have modeled creation throughout history. You get the model wrong, everything you build on it is wrong as well. As nice as it may be to imagine that we're evolving towards a better, more civilized, more compassionate world, what we're really evolving towards is a world full of memes and mind viruses that replicate better. It's even technological nowadays. It's time-consuming to know the truth beyond a certain point anyway, as everyone in the truth movement has found out. At what point does your head disappear up your own bottom? The truth is always based on some set of assumptions. So what is truth? And the more you understand your programming, the less anything looks like truth. So, let's take the space mirror concept. Here, the guy who wrote the book is of the neo-Darwinian school. That's Richard Dawkins and others like him. Pure scientism. But what if the simplified model of the truth of the whole universe was found? Just what if it had been? What if that model was fully testable by direct perception, philosophy, and back to those 8 Vedic truths, and using Trivium and quadrivium too? What if it proved in every respect without a single flaw? You don't have to go too far to realize that it's a proof of concept to end all proofs, if you were to go and look for yourself. And this is intentional design. It proves a designer. Ponder. Because that is our number system. It's been there for us throughout history. I know number systems have changed and all that, but not the core elements we're talking about. It's been there. All you ever didn't know was you had to put it in a circle. But what has every esoteric tradition told you? What do they investigate? The circle. The squaring of the circle. The width of a circle. Why? Are they all mad? No. It's to do with the geometry and the numbers that lies behind it. What if it had already long been known? It is the basis of Hermeticism after all. The prime number cross does, and I couldn't do it for you, but it does go back into that. So, more questions for you. What else would explain why so many religions, cults, secret societies, occult schools have sought the name of God and the divine proportions and the numbers and the words and the belief systems? They all look for it, often employing it against us once they've sussed it. They provide promises of a reward for obedience to God, then proceed to tell you how to obey. Usually by not thinking for yourself as they charge you for your forgiveness, changing your guilt into gold as they propagate the greatest deception with intent. Is it any wonder that the only act of violence that Jesus ever committed, whoever he was to throw them out of the temple? It's the philosophy of the slaver, and it induces a slave mentality. Pure occult art. Some of these are things that people in the freedom and truth movements have taken for granted and accept, but it's pure occult art being used against them. You must reflect what you're being told in the mirror, but that doesn't mean a straightforward reflection. We'll roll on to that point. I've mentioned the space mirror. Hopefully I'll leave you with some idea of what that means. The study of money, above all other fields in economics, is one in which complexity is used to describe truth. The process by which banks create money is so simple that the mind is repelled. With something so important, a deeper mystery seems only decent. That's a professor of economics at Harvard. And the deeper mystery, well, we're touching on it. The founder of the Bank of England, 1694, the bank hath benefit of interest on all monies, which it createth out of nothing, says he. Shit, why didn't we wake up? You know, go back to those times. People did. People did. There was hell on. People said, this is not fair. And what happened? They got crushed by this lot in this modern era, the pyramid scheme. The issue which has swept down the centuries and will leave us, and which will have to be fought sooner or later, is the people versus the banks. Aristotle said, for money was intended to be used in exchange, but not to increase its interest. And this term interest, which means the birth of money from money, is applied to the breeding of money, because the offspring resembles the parent. Wherefore, of all modes of getting wealth, this is most unnatural. It's a feedback system. Abe Lincoln, government should create, issue and circulate all the currency and credits needed to satisfy the spending power of governments. By the adoption of these principles, the taxpayers will be saved immense sums of interest. Money will cease to be master and become the servant of humanity. Please don't get rid of money. This is a meme that's out there. We don't need money. Ultimately, I still hold we probably don't. But if you get rid of money, we've had it, yeah?
Get rid of the money system.
Yes. There's a big difference. We need a system of exchange, and it must be an open system. Hermetic law, Hermetic octaves, it's open. It's an open physics. This money issuance is based on the closed physics model, all right? And it is intentionally based on the physics of creation. I'd go so far as to say that somewhere at the top, people know the real physics, and they know that by modeling it on this closed system, it sucks everything out for them. It's there. I made this realization. I remember thinking years and years ago, crikey, if I knew this and I actually had money and was sat at that top table, I could control the world just like that and no one would ever see. Then it's like, oh my God, hang on, that someone is doing that. So are they magicians, sorcerers, alchemists, or just clever thieves? That's just a few definitions of what each of those things are. I would say that those who some call the Illuminati, I'd call them Jesuit, and they are sorcerers, but not true alchemists. They're mere impersonators. Their sorcery is flawed, and they will be unwound by it. Self-realization in the New Age is being misrepresented as self-empowerment in the New World Order. That's taking the concept of me, 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 which actually is what meme means, it's me, me, and kind of twisting it around the Mobius strip. It is the two systems where money is created by a private monopoly in limited supply, which represents an interest-bearing debt note, or where money is created by the state as a receipt for goods or services and is debt-free. That's a closed system compared to an open system. We've always had the choice. We can change to this tomorrow. In the former, the system of money is closed, and there is never as much money in circulation as there is debt, and hence scarcity becomes the order of the day, as limited supplies of money compete for limited goods, resource, and energy. In the latter system, money is open and can expand as the economy, whose goods and service it represents as receipts, expands with it. In terms of an analogy to physics, the former system can never function at over unity, whereas in the latter, it must. Creation of wealth. Pure creation of wealth. Which is why they want you to believe in this day and age that fractional reserve is the great evil. I'm not saying it's a good thing, but it ain't the great evil. The bankers brought the system down, not on the back of fractional reserve. It helped them. But you must understand fractional reserve is legal. It's lawful, it's legal. Moral, I don't know, it's another thing. You can't take them to court on that. You can't take them to court on the fact that they were lending at loan to deposit, loan to reserves ratios in excess of 100%. That's against the law. It's a pyramid scheme. We can take every one of these people and lock them up under current law. In fact, we need to. We really need to. Not just the odd banker here and there getting his hand slapped. A huge crime has taken place before your very eyes. In 1947, Dewey and Dakin published their book, Cycles, The Science of Prediction. 1947. Which argued that the economy was driven by 4 cycles of different length. Dewey devoted his life... I'll stop reading that. What they did, right, was they got every bit of data on every damn thing they could ever collate. And they collated it, whether it was the life cycle of a flea, an economic life cycle, the life cycle of a planet. They did everything, all data they took in and looked for patterns in it. And they found patterns, and it was published. They found them, and it was linked to the astrological dynamics, astrology. They point out very clearly that astrological cycles can either enhance or fall. Yeah? You can't, if the cycle is going up, you can't stop it and bring it down. They can't do that. They cannot control that. But what they can do is at the right Pythagorean kick points in the evolution of that octave, which their computers define for them now. They used to have to work this stuff out. It's just for them there now. They know when to intervene. Simple as that. On a real human basis, they know the cycles of money. They know the cycles of everything. And they play them. So if something's going down, they've just got to give it a little kick and it goes down fast. Nothing can stop it. This is how they do it. And the data has been there since 47. And they do work on this and other knowledge like that in the city. In fact, as Farrell points out, and I know this myself, in the city there are econophysicists. You know there's a great shortage of physicists and so on over the last few years. That's because the city took them all. They work there. They got 4 times the salary for leaving their physics rooms and going to work for the banks. Econophysics. Money is a new form of slavery. Blah, blah, blah. We know this now. Alchemy. More about the banks. Dr. John Dee. I know we'll have to draw this to a close. As I say, it could go on forever. I'll try and get to the key points now, because I believe there's a solution. Very briefly though, Dr. John Dee even, a great mind, and he scientifically investigated the occult, and there's a great story behind it. In his story, he talks about or you can read about the queen visiting him and looking in his magic mirror, where when she struck herself with a sword, the same hand came out of the mirror. So if you think about it, you could shake hands with yourself. In the mirror she looked in, you could shake hands with yourself. What's that? That's the space mirror defined x squared, y squared geometry. And what I'm pointing out here is that I think this was sussed back in the time of John Dee, this geometry, and it lies behind just about everything today. I can't prove that, I might even be completely wrong, but it's there in front of my face in the work of John Dee. And indeed there's one or two other things in his work as well which should at least cause you to pick your eyes up. In Plato's Timaeus he describes a reflective surface consisting of two mirrors at right angles. Such a mirror reverses its image in space and always gives three reflections. From the center of the mirror, space is broken up at right angles into 4 quadrants. Basically, this mirror shows you as everyone else sees you. You've never seen yourself, ever. Not in a mirror, not anywhere. This mirror, you see yourself. Ponder. Because it's that geometry that lies behind the realization that they've made, and I would argue, centuries ago. That certain individuals do see visions when gazing into transparent reflective surfaces is a well-established fact that can be regarded as an item of psychological knowledge. It's not under dispute. What you need to question is what these visions are and how to interpret them and how it can happen in the first place. If you stand in front of the space mirror, and we are constructing one, or Kevin is, hopefully, you can, in the right circumstances, see your thoughts in the space between you and the mirror. If you thought of an elephant, you'd see an elephant. But the problem is, if I was doing that now, so would you. These experiments have been done. John Dee, there's the tetrad as a pyramid with a tornado coming out the top. Rosicrucian.org. Incidentally, the Rosicrucians are a spin-off of John Dee's buddy. That's where Rosicrucianism came from. Arguably it merged with Giordano Bruno and his secret society and became the Illuminati, at which point they got trashed, you might say, by the Jesuits. Zipping through to the end, Hurricane Wilma had a 2 in the eye of it. That was seen on live TV. How the hell can that happen? It's not natural. And then it formed 2 eyes, incidentally. There's another one. There's an eye in the middle of that tornado. Okay? Linking.
Is this the use of heart?
Yeah, arguably, yeah. There's also another possibility, and that is that all life forms, all intelligent life evolves into a vortex being anyway of galactic scale and size and so on. That's what John Dee seemed to understand. That's what scientists seem to understand. Because if the angels were giving him secrets, it was scientific secrets. And we all know that it's all the science of the vortex anyway. So anyway, it's a long story. My personal perspective, well, since realizing there's a divine geometric plan, literally a divine harmony underlying all reality, I've been in a bit of a state of awe over it. But that's 25 years. It defines natural law. It's a humbling reality. Numbers are real. We didn't invent them, and we wouldn't have discovered it. If we had invented it, we wouldn't have only discovered the order when we put them around in a circle of 24. It comes with the inherent realization that this has been sought, if not already known, by a ruling cabal. And they use its spell to create everything that we have today. The temple and the money changers got together. Now, according to Sun Tzu, we have 2 strategies, go or chess. Now, if you haven't noticed, they play chess. They're the masters of 64, the square of the octave. And it dawns on me that the truth movement itself is already well placed in the go arena. So I've been suggesting a way that we can actually take them on. Meanwhile, shit happens back in reality. But have you noticed how there's usually an asshole somewhere dispensing it? We know who they are, we can see the whole, and they are truly vulnerable for the first time in history, and only in these times, I think. So, I'm suggesting we feed them a laxative by asking a rhetorical question and reflecting the shit that they unleash, pardon the language, and we reflect it in the mirror, the one that they use. It requires a cast of all colours, religions, creeds and philosophies to come together and just ask one question. Well, we don't need a revolution. Let's go and ask them one question. If we don't like the answer, you can have a revolution then, but the answer will bring everything down if you ask the question properly and in the right way. So the auditions for this are real. But what is the question, and should we even utter it until the moment that we go and ask it? Action. One has to be, but paradoxically, in order to be, one must first do. Then one is. The realization of an aim, however small, represents the completion of a whole octave of activity along the line of time. It has a beginning, middle, and end. It's therefore a whole phenomena, a complete octave, not just a theory or a vacuous dream in an idle mind, but a sequence of harmoniously composed signals of magnetically based intelligence, which, being complete in itself, must also have its own equally real existence. The power of thought, how to create with mind, the pure Hermetic arts. Hold a mirror up to them. That is actually happening now. They're holding mirrors up to policemen. Brilliant. We can't remove them, but we can remove their cornerstone and laugh as their structure crumbles. That's their control over our currency. It's an illusion, a real one with consequences. They've taught a generation to understand the dialectic they employ against us, but we forget. We know this because they've told us it's so. There is perhaps more to it. The mirror does have real power, as you see above, so turn it on them literally, metaphorically, and rhetorically. Natural law demands that we come together to stage a passion play of our own, not to give protest or to demand anything, merely to ask a rhetorical question, even in silence. Give them nothing, no thing. Be nothing but the question and the intent behind it. They must parley, incidentally, Rule 17 of their occult law handbook. You've seen the pirates. They must parley if you ask them in the right way. So let's call them out. But if you're not ready to accept their answer, then don't ask it. We don't need an answer, nor do we actually want one. It's irrelevant. It's the question which is the key. And this lies at the basis of Arthurian law and romance, and it's surely no coincidence either. These movements, the truth movement, were replete with artists, writers, musicians, thinkers, activists, bohemian hermits. We have all we need. We can write and script and stage the show. Literally as a work of Hermetic art. A complete and harmonious octave of resonance to rock their world and reflect the spell they cast through their own mirror of deception. In a magical kind of way, it can't work. This is occult philosophy and science to be used against them. In plain English, what I'm saying is, if one day we get off our asses and go to London, we can literally destroy the spell. We literally can. We don't need a riot. But we would be unwise not to realize that we would be unleashing on these centuries of forces, and they're not going to let this go. They will attack. They always have, and they will again. And this is where I've been misinterpreted in the past. I'm not saying let's have a violent revolution. I'm saying it will come to that at some point, won't it? So let's have one, but not a violent one. Yes?
Guy told me that there can't be a revolution in this country anymore because it happened 4 centuries ago, the English Civil Wars. So nobody in this country anymore would have the stomach for a revolution.
No, I get that, and we don't need one. Hell, I mean, I could stand here and say, let's go and kick their asses, but the truth is they kick our asses in no time at all, and we get nowhere. They do have a monopoly on violence, but at some point, they won't. If we don't do something, at some point not too far down the line, people are going to rise up, and that's what they want. So we should rise up, literally stage a passion play, but with one thing in mind and one thing only. Ask them a question, a rhetorical one, that they can't answer. And even if they tried, their answer or their silence is equally condemning. So what is that question? What question would you ask them? Well, why do you run paedophile rings? Why do you do this? Why do you do that? That's great. You would get nowhere, and the public wouldn't wake up to it. But if you ask the question, and I'm not uttering it, but it's along the lines of, why do you issue our currency as a debt through a private institution? Why are these people lending us our money when you, our government, can change this tomorrow? Can you tell us?
Yeah, that's a good question.
But only the financial one. Nothing else. No protests. The problem with the Occupy St. Paul's was that everyone either had their own thing they were protesting over or didn't even actually protest. They didn't know what they were there for. People interviewing them, what are you protesting about? Gay rights or this right or that right? All great stuff needs protesting about. Doesn't change the world. Do you know 100,000 people actually put their damn names to the beer escalator, to remove the beer escalator? 1 penny off a pint of beer. 100,000 people. Try raising 1,000 people over the one issue that will change the world. You're programmed not to. And we are programmed not to. The entire truth movement's been programmed not to respond. Peace and love. Love is all there is. Everything else is illusion. Well, is it true? I asked Michael Desarian if there was a solution. He didn't think there was. I told him I did. We need to come together to ask the right question of the right people in the right way at the right time to avoid the spirit of rebellion. And do it in a grand theatre, one that attracts public attention and can't be denied. I detailed that in my synthesis online, which I only published once, and that was it. Now he's saying don't invoke the spirit of rebellion. This is all common sense, it's all logic. Everyone must go there. We can't invoke that sense, but we can't half-dissipate it. People are coming to the same conclusions. The dialectic is not an illusion, it exists in nature at every level. But neither is it a mere reflection of polar opposites as they would teach you. Rather, it is, the dialectic they use is as one is to -1, reflected in nothing. -1 squared is 1. 1 squared is 1. It's the same and the other. This is the dialectic they use, but they've taught you to believe it's just a straightforward mirror reflection. They are not opposites, they are the same and the other, the two sides of the Mobius strip. But together, with every multiple of 6, because of what we've looked at before, they establish the rhythm of the primes, which in turn define the dynamics of the spherical wave, the standing wave underlying all of physics. And there's just a few little witterings there. Has the truth movement floundered in its own dogma, none of which are new? The enemy would have us seek music on an LP record with a microscope. We see the grooves, but we don't see the music. We need a stylus. We have to engage the analog, the real. Make contact. Nature then takes care of the rest. If you do that, this is the entire message of the Hermetic code, that we, at some point, have to act in full accordance with the natural system it defines. And that means asking a question. There's no whole truths. There's part truths. The sun sets in the west. Does it? At what point does something become self-evident? And just to close, because I know I need to now, I could go on for hours, but prime number cryptography. Plichter has implied that by sussing the sequence of prime numbers, as everything on this planet is locked down by prime number codes, there's not actually been anything that's secure since 1997 when he published. Someone has the technology to shut down nuclear missiles. Perhaps it wasn't ET who did it after all. And what about crop circles? Fantastic study of crop circles. Awesome stuff. Pure sacred geometry. Very clever people doing these things. Whoever was behind the Barbary glyph was quite familiar with obscure data from Western esoteric, Kabbalistic and Hermetic alchemical tradition, and also with techniques of higher dimensional projective geometry. As if that's not enough, it encodes the ancient Pythagorean tetrad too. So, who's talking to who? Yeah? What's going on? And which door actually leads to justice? So, it's a nice closing point, I think. And as I referred to David Bowie quite a bit, for reasons that would have become obvious if we'd been playing a bit of music and stuff. And in the same spirit as he said it, this show will stay the longest in our memories, not just because it's the end of the tour, but it's the last show we'll ever do. Thank you.